I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Simon Crocker and my brain's gone, and Mike Walden. Congratulations. Big round of applause. What I'd like to do is just talk to Simon and Mike about different aspects of the film and the making of the film. And then we'll open it up to questions from the audience later on. This was based on a true story. And my understanding is that from the film perspective, it all started after an article in Vanity Fair. But can you tell us how the film came about?
Well, you're right. It was, we first spotted it. I was representing photographers, of which Andrew Douglas was one of them at the time. And one of my photographers was sent...
Can everyone hear?
Can you all hear? Yeah. And one of my photographers was sent to cover the feature by Vanity Fair. So I saw the text ahead of it being published. And Andrew, I sent it to Andrew, and he thought it was really interesting. But we found someone else had opted it. So we forgot about it, and he rolled forward about 5 years, I think, or 6 years. And Andrew noticed, Andrew lives in Los Angeles, that there was a call going out for people who might be interested in directing this film called You Want Me to Kill Him. And it was Brian Singer's company, and he went to see them. They sent the script, and Andrew read it and I read it. And it was okay. I mean, it was kind of a fairly documentary take. And Andrew went in to see Brian, and you know, Brian said, "What do you think?" He said, "Well, it's a great subject. We knew about, actually we knew about this several years ago and tried to option it, but you're obviously the person who got ahead of us." And he said, "I wouldn't do it like this. I'd do a different approach. I would do it from one boy's point of view." Anyway, Brian liked that, and he said, "Okay, I think your idea is better. If you can find some development money and find a writer, go ahead." And so we brought in Anonymous Content, which is a well-known American independent distributor, and Andrew also directs commercials. They're a big commercials company. And then we put a sort of call out for writers, and we cowed them down, and Mike was the winner of the writing beauty contest. And that's how it got underway.
Just going back a little step, how did you sell the whole concept to investors?
Well, the first people we got on board was Momentum Pictures, and to be honest, it was Mike's script which got people interested. I think it was, the whole thing about the internet was becoming a much more talked about thing, and they said they'd seen a lot of scripts actually about it, but this was the first one that they felt, convinced by. And so it was really the strength of the script, and then we got, and the financiers agreed as well. So I mean, it was the script that got it going, and because we knew we were not going to have stars in it. I mean, the two leads obviously had to be young, so we had to go with an idea that was going to carry.
Okay, moving forward, what was your approach? How did you get the crew and the cast on board?
Well, I mean, the casting was done by Lucinda Sison, who's a well-known casting director and a friend of Brian Singer's. And I mean, casting is a real art in itself. Most people don't know what a casting director really does, but they are one of the main sort of key artists in putting a film together. And finding those two boys was the make or break of the film, and she relentlessly kind of brought people back in. And in fact, we were very close to casting some other people, and Jamie was very good in his reading, but we were afraid he looked too old. And but it was Andrew actually who, when we sort of about to cast someone, I said, "No, I'd like to bring that boy back in and tell him to shave twice if necessary." And actually the joke was, when we filmed at that school, which is a real school in Harlow, ironically it's a school where Jamie Winston went as a pupil. Most of the kids looked older than them, and they were 16, so we needn't have worried really. And the crew, well, Peter Heslop, who was the other UK producer with me, He's a very, very experienced line producer. He did films like, King's Speech and so on. And so he was able to get in top-class crew at a very reasonable price because he'd done so many movies. So we're lucky.
Okay, Mike, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions now. How did you approach writing the script? Was it very different from the original the original idea that you were presented with?
No, not in a sense. I mean, right from the very can you hear me? Right from the very beginning, I decided that I wanted to tell the story from Mark's subjectivity because I felt like that was the best way to hopefully get the audience to empathise with him, and that was also Andrew's idea too. So, it was good that from the beginning we were, had the same idea, and I think that if you tell the story from Mark's subjectivity, then hopefully, whether you guys felt the same way, but the audience will be tricked alongside with him, and it'll be much easier to empathise with him. So that was my starting point, and then also we wanted to make a movie that was, I guess, a drama hidden in a thriller is kind of what we said, something which would be cinematic and something which would be exciting, but also to be truthful to the characters.
Well, people are asking me what type of film it was, and I said, well, you could call it a drama. Is there a suspense drama or an urban thriller? I think there are different ways to describe it, but I think that certainly most of us were hooked and really didn't know what was happening until the very end, which was the objective that you wanted to achieve. The real life story, not many people would know really what happened because it didn't get that much media coverage at the time. But maybe you can share with the audience here in Luxembourg, were there parts of the real life story that you left out? I made a reference to truth can be stranger than fiction. If you could share with us some of that.
Yeah, please. I mean, exactly. Truth is stranger than fiction. We had to tone down a lot of the real things that happened. I mean, in the actual story, Mark thought that John had a chip embedded in his head, which he was getting messages conveyed to him. He thought that he was going to meet Tony Blair, the Prime Minister. He thought that there was secret treasure buried at the bottom of the ocean that was somehow going to come his way. There were lots and lots of things which were really outlandish and really, really hard to believe in the true story, which we felt would just seem too outrageous for a feature film. But the real life story is much, much harder to believe than the film. But it did really happen, so it is a case of truth being stranger than fiction. And it's worth checking out the Vanity Fair article because it explains it in a lot of detail.
The only point I was going to make was, I think one of the key things was, if you read the Vanity Fair article, Mark, it's very difficult. Mark comes across as a bit of a klutz, really, and you didn't really have a great deal of sympathy with him. And there's also a strong feeling that somehow he colluded in it. And that's not the story we wanted to tell. We weren't making a documentary. We weren't telling the story precisely. We were taking that story and fictionalizing it, partly because we couldn't get the real story beyond the basic facts because obviously it was under wraps. But we wanted people to come away feeling some sympathy to both boys in a sense. And, they were the victims, both victims, as the judge said. So that was kind of important.
I've got another question for you, Simon. If you could share with us some figures about what was the budget for this film, how long did it take to shoot, and things like that.
Yeah. The budget was 2.7 million, but about 500,000 that was actually legal and financing costs. That's the sort of reality of independent financing. It was a 6-week shoot. It was 12 weeks pre-production, 20 weeks post. So that was the basic facts. We were going to shoot in Manchester. That was the original intention, but the budget didn't work out. Because we were going to have to take a lot of crew up there, and the costs were going to be too high. So we chose Harlow. In a way, it didn't really matter. It's a dormitory kind of town. So that was the key thing.
But the accents weren't from the Northwest.
No, they weren't meant to be. I mean, we abandoned it being in this real setting. I mean, I think the important thing was it was in a sort of very suburban, kind of setting. That was the key thing. Because, these kids weren't ghetto kids. They didn't know how to handle knives. They weren't part of gangs. I mean, this is, these were kids who, came from, well, at least one of them came from a pretty decent home. They were doing well at school. They weren't kind of people who didn't turn up at school. So in that sense, they were very sort of ordinary kids. So this is what makes the story more extraordinary. And of course, the thing you can remember, it's 2003. So it's just before social media really exploded. It's pre-Facebook, it's pre-Twitter and everything else. And it was a time of where really it was this kind of dark jungle that kids were venturing into, and the parents had no idea what was going on.
Mike, I know Simon's partly answered this, but I'd like to ask you, would you feel yourself that Mark was naive or gullible or stupid or...
No, I mean, I'm probably a bit more sympathetic to Mark than Simon. I mean...
Sorry, may I just make one small point here? When we were talking earlier, Simon, you mentioned that you were looking for a young scriptwriter that could identify, that could have empathy with the teenagers themselves, and that's partly why that you were brought in, Mark.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't much older in 2003 than the boys were themselves, so I suppose I had quite a good understanding of what their lives would have been like. And an interesting thing from the article is that Mark, when he found out that John was behind it all, was truly shocked. He did believe in everything that had happened. He had mourned Rachel, and he was very, very surprised. And I felt like there's probably something that all of us could fall for if we were in the right circumstances and it was in the right time.
I presume if you want to believe, you will believe.
Exactly, yeah. It just suited Mark at this moment when he was coming to the end of school. He wasn't going to be a footballer. He was probably going to leave school. His star was on the wane, if you like. And I think that the attention and the idea that he could become this person who was going to lead this exciting life was very attractive to him and very seductive. And I think it's a con, if you like, that most people wouldn't fall for, but John got Mark just at the right moment where Mark almost wanted to fall for it, I think.
Also, from the point of view of writing the script and doing the research, what level of access did you have into police records, into court records?
We saw the court transcripts, and we had some access to the transcripts of the email interactions between the two boys, but not much else beyond that. And the chat room transcripts were pretty fascinating because it confirmed all the completely outrageous things that Mark fell for.
Maybe this question for you, Simon. We're at the stage now that the film has been seen at various festivals. I saw it it was the world premiere in Edinburgh at the festival there in June. And the question for you now is, like, how easy or how difficult is it for you to sell the concept to the public? I'll ask you later on about distribution, to the public, because, for example, when I was putting this program together, I had to be very careful what I said in order not to reveal what was going to happen. I did mention at one time that it could be a good advertisement for the safer use of the internet at the moment, trying not to give too much away. But from the public's point of view, it must be a tricky one.
Yeah, it was always going to be a marketing quandary. In fact, the first meeting we ever had with Momentum, that was the primary discussion about how do you tell a story where you can't tell the story. So, I mean, I think what we chose to do was deliberately point people in the wrong direction. So it was fine for them to, I mean, a number of people, obviously, when the MI5 lady comes in, when the MI5 lady came in, quite a number of people, and it's almost, to some degree, that was part of what they meant. Some people were meant to, didn't believe she was MI5, but on the other hand, didn't disbelieve she wasn't real. And the truth is, the police took 3 months. I mean, obviously, it looks shorter on the screen, but in reality, it took them 3 months and a very dogged, the Sarah Clayton role was, in fact, a kind of computer analyst in the police. Took 3 months to. They thought they were looking for an adult kind of grooming ring, and they in fact arrested someone and had them locked up for a month because John actually found a way of hacking into someone else's email and sending some of his computer and sending some of the emails out. Yeah. Sorry, what's that?
How do we mark this?
Oh yeah. So I mean, the quandary is. So we decided to point everyone in the wrong direction, and as though there was they were basically both involved in something which was to do with the girl and the person who killed her and everything else. And, we hope that worked.
Well, it certainly worked for me. If you hold on to the mic, if there are questions from the audience, if you just put up your hand, I'll get the mic to you. Joy, you've got 2 hands up. You're always one for questions. Okay, Vicky.
Hi. In the ending credits, I saw Harvey Weinstein's name. Was he actually an executive producer on this?
He was, yeah. He's got the rights for France and Australia. Interesting combination of countries, actually. And Papua New Guinea radio as well, for some reason. It's a plan.
Okay, I'm going to ask a couple of other questions now, but if anybody from the audience does have any other questions, please raise your hand. What is now the future of the film?
World domination.
Okay, and how are you going to achieve world domination?
Well, it's rolling out slowly. I mean, it's out in the UK. I mean, we had an unfortunate thing really in the UK because our distributor Momentum was actually taken over in February this year by another distributor who's basically wanted to put Momentum, eliminate them as a competitor. So we've had a bit of a rough riding them, but we've sold it to some very good companies, in a number of other countries. And we've just done a deal for America with Robert De Niro's Tribeca. They do the festival, and they also do, about 6 or 8 very good independent films a year. They did What Richard Saw was one of them, which is good independent film. And they're very keen. They're going to roll it out next April, probably off the back of the Tribeca Festival.
And do you have any idea of the number of cinemas or?
They're opening in 6 cities to start with. I mean, a film like this is never going to get massive distribution theatrically. But I mean, what they're going to do is what happens a lot with independent films of this size with no stars. They do what's known as a day and date release, multi-platform release, which means it will come out in cinemas the same day as it comes out on DVD, on VOD, because in America distributors aren't worried about it coming out the same day as DVD. Because there is a feeling that people who want to see this film have an option. They can see it in different platforms, and it seems to work for cinemas, and they're not threatened by it. So they're very passionate about it, and they seem to want to give it a really good go. So let's hope so.
You mentioned the issue of stars. Like many of us would know, for example, Joanne Froggatt from her role in Downton Abbey. And you were saying earlier that the 2 boys that played the 2 lead parts, that the cinema audiences could be seeing a lot of them in the future. If you could tell us a little bit about that, please.
Toby is actually filming at the moment.
And he played?
He played John. He's filming a big American TV drama. It's a historical drama. It's sort of based on Mary Queen of Scots, and that's going on right now. And Toby, Jamie's just been signed. I can't remember what the film is. What was it? The girl from Kick-Ass, yeah. And I can't remember what it is, but it's a very good movie. I mean, he's been signed for that. So I think as I've hope you all agree they're both fine actors. And it was very funny because Toby, when he came to the set every morning, and he said immediately I put my Velcro kind of jacket on and shoes and they did my hair. He did become this kind of strange, nerdy sort of kid. And, you know, I thought he was a bit weird. And then after the film, when we were sort of at the cast party, he was back to being normal Toby. I said, thank God you're back to being who you were.
Actually, when we saw them in Edinburgh, did the Q&A, I must say that they had their hairstyles different, etc., etc. And I could hardly tell the difference between the two of them, although they're completely strikingly different characters on the big screen. Up close and like where we are now in Edinburgh, I could hardly tell the difference.
Well, I mean, there are, yeah, I mean, I'm not so sure about that, but I mean, they, you know, they're both very ambitious and they're both very focused, and yeah, I think they're going to have good careers.
I hinted a little bit at the beginning. No, Joy, I'm going to give you the mic now, and then I'm going to go on to that.
I just wondered if this was really a producer's film and a scriptwriter's film, where the director is. So did you pick out? I mean, was it like that initially? Your idea? You picked out the director?
No, Andrew and I were partners. Andrew was involved right from the beginning. I mean, as I said, when I was managing at the time, and this, he was a photographer, and one of my other photographers went to shoot the article, but I showed it to Andrew first, and it was so. I mean, he was involved right from the beginning. He was involved in choosing Mike. He was involved. No, it's a director's film. I mean, you know, a producer's role is to. I mean, most people don't know what a producer does, and of course, in different countries and different things, they do different things. But you know, their role shifts as the film goes on into production. But at the beginning, they are involved in the development. Sometimes it's finding the director. In this case, it started out as a director-producer team, and then it's you're trying to find the elements which are going to attract finance, and then take it on to the next level, and then you work to bring the best crew in to realize what the director wants to do. You know.
Okay, and what kind of were the I should say the visual and artistic premises on which you based the film, because it was a discussion how you shoot a film like this. I mean, there was a lot of very close ups on the character, very close to the characters and so on. If you could expand a bit on that, perhaps. Yeah. Okay, but
I mean, those are choices that a director makes in shooting. I mean, I think he wanted an immediacy. I mean, I think it's just a direct. You can have three directors and they'd all shoot it totally differently. Andrew's background was he was a very successful photographer who then went into commercials in America and then documentaries. We made a film called Searching for the Wrong-Eyed Jesus, which was a sort of a successful sort of prize-winning documentary. And so he came from that sort of tradition, and so the choices he made were governed by that, really. And
Okay, we have another question up here.
Hi. Were you ever tempted to place the movie in present day, to move it from 2003 to 2012 and all the modern social media?
I think it was something that we did discuss. The two reasons I'd say that we stuck with it was, one, the authenticity of the real story. If you're going to say based on a true story, then it's best to try and stick to it as closely as you can. And secondly, and the main reason is something that Simon kind of said before, which was it was really interesting setting in terms of the internet. 2003, a lot of people were still unaware of how big it was becoming, and it was certainly in terms of a generation gap, it was something which Mark's parents probably didn't understand at all and had no access to. And also I think it would have been harder for John if Facebook had been available and if Twitter had been available, just because it would have been harder to have that degree of anonymity that he was able to have just through the chat rooms. Also, Mark would have asked the question, he had a webcam, why couldn't he have seen Rachel? At that time it was easy just to say I don't have a webcam because not many people did, but now most computers have them. So in a way, it was easier to set it then, because of the infancy of the internet. I think it fit well for the film.
Simon, we were talking, or I was talking earlier on about your background in primarily music and photography. You've done this now. What is the future for you? What projects have you got on the burner?
Well, Mike and I have another story which we're...
Well, my next question is going to be future collaboration, but you don't mean to that.
The next thing, I mean, I'll let Mike explain the story, but there's a project that we're doing. Yeah, you.
It's another true story. It's just the short synopsis of it is it's about a visit Muhammad Ali made to Newcastle in the 70s. Again, it's a very unlikely tale that actually happened. So we're retreading similar ground in a sense about a true story which would be hard to make up. This one is more of a feel-good film than You Want Me to Kill Him, I think.
So the ending to that story, or the premise of that story, would possibly be a little bit like the ending of The Commitments, or something like that.
Yeah. There's a moment at the end of the film where the audience won't be sure whether it's going to happen or not, and if it does, you hope that they'll all cheer and everyone will leave the cinemas happy. Well,
talking about cheering and leaving cinemas happy, we are so delighted that you guys could come here, talk about your film. We'd love to see you back in Luxembourg when your next project comes out.
It's actually being released in Benelux by a film in not too distant future.
Okay. Simon and Mike, thank you very, very much indeed.